Welcome to the Accounting Arc Podcast, where analysis, reaction, and comedy collide to tackle the big topics from the world of accounting and beyond. Join our trio of transformation agents as they discuss the hottest topics in and out of the profession, from breaking down industry trends, to reacting to everyday events, to uncovering the hidden humor in numbers. With wisdom, insight, and a dash of levity, they're proving that accounting isn't just about the numbers. It's about life. Because after all, accounting is in everything. The Accounting Arc Podcast starts now.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Accounting Arc. It's just Liz and I today, and we thought we would kind of talk about an article that we saw that was about, and now I'm actually forgetting which firm it was. One of the big four firms, and if I can find it really quickly, I'll throw the name in, has actually created this huge internship program where they are actually taking interns through a whole program and assessing critical thinking skills. So initial gut is that this is in direct response to AI and the changes that AI is bringing in, and critical thinking skills becomes even more important.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I think that the internship programs that we have in the industry need to evolve. And it's really cool to see that happening at the Big Four level. And also, to think about what that means, like carrying down through the entire profession. Generally speaking, when you see the Big Four make big swings in the way that in the theory behind what they're doing in programs, in development, in early career items, it's because of research and data and experience. And it's something that affects the whole industry and is not just isolated to the large firm population.
Yeah. So I found the article. It's KPMG that's doing this. But actually, what you just said reminded me that the AI CPA is also working on some curriculum, and now I can't remember what they're calling it, but basically it was a professional upskilling. So the intention is that it's for new hires, and it's equipping them with what they need to do to accelerate the move to what we normally would think of as a senior role at the firms.
Yeah, well, and I think it's really interesting because for a while now we've been seeing research come out showing the gaps between education and workforce expectations, right? And one of the biggest gaps, we talked about this probably last year, is in communication, right? And we see, big gaps when people graduate from college, their communication skills aren't necessarily what's expected in a workplace environment. And it's not something that people take you might have a communications course, but it's about formal business communications, not necessarily about how to actually communicate with a team. And so, I find it really interesting that there's all this body of research across the board, not just in accounting, where it shows gaps between where students come out of school and where they're expected at an entry level position. And it's mostly those soft skills that you see the biggest gaps in. And so I find it really interesting that happens, across the board. And then we have, as a profession, and as every profession that takes, students and puts them into the workforce, has a responsibility to that, population to teach them those soft skills. So where do they learn it in the accounting profession? Generally speaking, it's in their internship. And then if they don't do a good internship, it's their first year of employment where they actually get exposure to these soft skills and understanding what that means for their careers.
Completely. Okay, and I found the AICPA one. It is called the Profession Ready Initiative, a research-driven program by the AICPA designed to identify and develop the skills early career CPAs need to succeed in an AI-driven and evolving profession. So I think
Right.
addresses a lot of what you've described, which is paralleling what KPMG looks like they're doing in their internship program, which is both teaching as well as assessing capability for these. When you said soft, I started calling them power skills. 'Cause I feel like they're really the things that drive a more powerful and a more effective leader at all levels.
Yeah. So the last study I looked at that shows power skills, if that's what we want to call it, totally fine with that. Like the new definition that I read was from the Job Outlook 2026 Spring Update of the National Association of Colleges and Employers, or NACE as they're called, which showed like the biggest gaps we're seeing are communication, teamwork, professionalism, critical thinking, and that's a big one when it comes to an AI enabled workforce, technology, career and self development, and leadership. And the gaps that we're seeing go from like 43% on communication down to about 10% on technology and leadership. Now, the one thing that that report did show is that the AI skills of the students graduating now and entering the workforce is actually 6.9% higher than the workforce expected proficiency. So, like, that's actually really cool that there is a piece where students are coming out ahead of where, their, I would say, like direct supervisors are, right? But when you're looking at this across the board, like all of those power skills, right? Like, how do you communicate? How do you work on a team? How are you professional? And I think that it is very indicative, that gap that we're seeing coming out in the data, of these internship programs, and the way that not only the Big Four, but the whole profession, the AICPA, like you mentioned, is kind of modifying because really internships are training programs at the end of the day. Like, it is
Yeah.
the opportunity for students to get a feel for the profession, to learn about what it actually means to be in the workforce, and to actually like experience the job before you fully graduate and take on a full-time role in it. And, I think for at least as long as I've been in the profession, we have always considered internship roles as training programs. Like, that is the first step of a training program. And then you enter your first year. And so, it does make it considerably more beneficial to the students if we're looking at these power skills, if we're looking at how do we train that critical thinking skill and teach those muscles, so that when
Mhm.
we enter the workforce, we're not entering the workforce anymore as technicians in the way that we used to. We're not entering data entry, right? Every day. We're not sitting with a shoebox tax client scanning documents. And, we're interacting with AI, and we're leading critical thinking thoughts, and we're organizing. It is a very different state of the profession. And so our internship programs need to evolve.
Agree, agree. At the same time, I also though feel like the part of the role of the internship programs is to help the students figure out where they want to end up working in the profession,
Yeah.
right? So audit, tax, finance being kind of your typical exposure areas. And so I think it's also critical that through these internships that the students get exposure to what would they be doing as a tax associate? What would they be doing as an audit associate? Or even as a
Yeah.
clerk, or maybe even higher, hopefully, on the finance side.
Yeah, or coming into a CAS team and figuring out how to actually perform accounting services, right? Holistically, or going into corporate accounting. There are many, many career options. And I totally agree. Like, and beyond that, it's like culture fit too. We need students to have exposure to understand, do you actually want public accounting? That's a different culture than internal accounting. That's a different culture than finance, right? And so it's coming through the experiential learning side of it to understand what that looks like. And so, getting back to the big internship program that sparked this conversation is, KPMG seeing this gap and saying, okay, how do we take a group of highly motivated, incredibly intelligent students, and we give them exposure to what types of critical thinking and leadership skills and these power skills that they'll need to be incredibly successful with the next level of technology. And they brought them together, I believe, in Florida, right? And spent, a fair amount of time giving those trainings and like teaching them what it actually looks like in the profession, which is a slightly different type of internship than historically, when you just kind of get
Mhm.
thrown into the middle of a busy season and
Yeah.
whatever is needed, you do, right?
That's why I think the AI CPA initiative is a important one because yeah, large firms, not doesn't have to be big four, but large firms will probably have the capabilities to do these types of
Hmm.
manage these types of internship programs. The everyone else is not going to be able to run it on their own. So seeing the AICPA step up to try and fill some of that gap, I mean, because
Yeah.
granted, the Profession Ready Initiative, I believe, is primarily going to be training. So it's going to be
Hmm.
kind of like CPE. There still needs to be an element that incorporates that into the firm's culture, for example, as you said, and the firm's
Hmm.
work processes as well.
Absolutely. And then, I think that there's a big gap at the state level as well. And so I know you're working on some of that stuff, and I hope that other states kind of pick up that torch and say, how do we support these local firms in a meaningful way with boots on the ground, right?
Definitely, definitely. And yeah, that's we've actually designed our intern and having this we designed our internship program to be a little of kind of both of what we discussed, which is why I'm actually glad as we're talking through this. I'm kind of validating the concept. So the concept we're working with is take someone very early. So they have to have completed, for example, the intro to financial accounting. And
Hmm.
we're trying to create a partnership between nonprofits, small nonprofits that need accounting done for them, or actually, I'm going to call it bookkeeping, need bookkeeping done for them. And we introduce the concept is that we're creating a partnership between the nonprofit, ourselves as the Center for Accounting Transformation, and then the school. So we've reached out to each of the schools to identify, do you have an internship course? What are the requirements for that course? How can we align the way that we're going to run our internship to your course so that we can recruit the nonprofits and help oversee the bookkeeping for the nonprofit while giving the students exposure both to this is what it's like to actually do bookkeeping for a client, and then two, these are the professional skills or professionalisms type skills that you've described.
Yeah, no, and I think that's awesome. And, one of the things I think would have been incredibly beneficial to come out of an internship program or out of school understanding was more of like, what does it actually take to be successful in this profession? Like, I did internship program at Grant Thornton, and I was an intern for maybe 6 months before I was offered a full-time position. And the internship program was basically a part-time first year associate position. Like there was not really any difference at the time. And granted, like this was a long time ago, right? And it was a relatively small office for that firm, but I, learned what the job expectation was and that I could do that. I didn't learn anything about leadership skills. I didn't learn anything about, actual communication or the expectation there or project management or, that was all on the job. Like I had to learn it. Like, I remember walking into my first like delegation of a real project and my manager was sitting there like telling me a million things super fast and I was trying to absorb it. And I am actually an auditory learner. So for me, if you speak to me, I will remember it as long as I can pay attention to you and like follow the thread. And I will, in most cases, actually remember it verbatim. Like that's how my brain works. And if I take notes, it distracts that and I don't remember it. And so I have to like auditorily process and then go take notes. And I walked out of that meeting and like there were a couple things I didn't quite understand and I didn't get a chance to ask questions because he was going a million miles a minute, right? So it was a long story to get to the point. And so there were two critical things I didn't understand in the conversation to actually jot down to like remember for whatever. And he blamed it on me not taking notes and then put it
Mhm.
on a performance review that I don't take notes and that it's a problem. And I was sitting there going, first off, nobody told me the expectation was to walk into a meeting with a notepad. Like, yeah, it makes sense now as an adult, but like I was 21 years old and nobody was like, here, kid, here's a notepad, here's a pencil. Like, for people to think that you're paying attention, they need you to like actually take notes during the conversation, right? And so there's like all these like little things that you have to learn on the job. And I was devastated by that performance review because I thought I nailed it. Like I thought I kicked it out of the park. And I got this performance review that was like, this kid doesn't pay attention and doesn't take notes. And I'm like, cool. useful. Like that would
Yes.
have been better feedback like when we started the conversation, right? And so, internships I think need to give these kids these skills and understanding. And in today's day
Yeah,
and age, like we have so much support around technology. Like I could put an AI note taker in there and I would never have to take notes again. But of
yeah,
course you have to get people's consent. So like, does the intern know that if you walk into your manager meeting and you have like Firefly's app on your phone running, you need to actually tell somebody? They might not know that, right? Like
right.
there's all these gaps of things that you come out of school and you're like, I can use these fancy tools, I can do this, I can do that. But at the same time, it's the same learning process that we all had to go through. And so formalizing that is really important. And I think will make a big difference to the profession moving forward.
I think in accounting that we too often forget that we have to put our own mask on first, like in an airplane, right? Put our own mask on first before we help others. And our whole thing is, oh, there's clients, I gotta help the clients, I gotta do all this stuff. And we're giving so much of ourselves that we're not taking that time to take care of ourselves. It's part of the reason why at the center we created this whole personal resilience program, which is really for you to be that strong rock and foundation for the clients, you need to be solid yourself first. So it really is a matter of taking care of ourselves, and then we can take care of others. In fact, we can take care of more others the stronger that we are as a foundation. And that's also why a lot of what we do is based in teams, because then even if you're faltering, some of the teammates can jump in to cover or to allow you the time to rest so that you can rest, but we're still holding everybody up. So that's why I think working together in a team is so important, as well as taking care of yourself. You actually raised, I think, a really important point because, well, two actually really important points from what you just said. One is the need to actually adjust expectations, because there may not be an expectation as much anymore around taking notes if there's
Mm-hmm.
an AI note taker in the meeting. So
Mm-hmm.
that would be one thing that we probably need to reevaluate whether taking notes is actually required now in this new context. The second thing, though, that I think is also important is the fact that you identified and know that you're an auditory learner, which to me says you should be provided with the opportunity, or we need to let you know, 21-year-old, you need to say that I'm an auditory
Mm-hmm.
learner. I'm going to listen. I'm not going to be taking notes right now, but just know that what I do is I go back and I reprocess and I take my notes afterwards. If you'd like to
Yep.
see those, I'm happy to share with you. Something to that effect, because that also is going to be for someone with dyslexia. That's going to be their process, is listen,
Mm-hmm.
and then later on, and they may not even get to the writing of the notes because of the dyslexia, but their learning process is going to be different.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's, I mean, another thing I struggled with as a young associate, right? Is I'm incredibly ADHD. I'm very vocal about being neurodivergent and I refuse to take medication mostly because I feel like I can compensate for myself. And I've spent very many years working on all of these compensation things. And that's one of them for me is like auditorily processing it and not distracting myself with like, I get distracted. Like you give me a pencil, I'm distracted by like the number
I've
of
seen.
ridges on the pencil. Like I'm distracted by how big and how squishy the eraser is. Like you give me a mechanical pencil, I'm just clicking. I'm clicking all day. Like there's no, like I can't stop myself from the clicking. I have to physically sit on my hands, right? Same thing with pens. And so it's like, these are things that I didn't even know that I had to vocalize. Like I had no idea that in the workplace there were accommodations provided to me because of my quote unquote disability, which I completely disagree that it's an actual disability, but legally it is, right? So like I have legal protections. I didn't know that. Nobody told me that. Like I was not prepared for that in any meaningful way. And, I think that there are so many ways to compensate and accommodate and like work with kids to like know these things up front that internship programs can do, right? But if you throw somebody into the deep end and you're like, okay, you're just a part-time first year associate, there's no formal internship process, you just come in, you do your work and learn on the job, there's still going to be this huge gap. And it goes back to those power skills that are not trained in college. Like you don't learn this stuff in college. You learn the technical accounting. And I think at this point, there's a lot more of like how to do the technical accounting with technology, which is
Yes.
wonderful, right? Like
Yes.
those curriculums are finally adapting and adopting, but you don't learn the power skills. You don't learn how to communicate your needs. You don't learn how to actually show up from a communication perspective or a leadership perspective or critical thinking gaps. Like there's huge critical thinking gaps. Like there is not one way to get from A to B. And how do we figure out what the best way is?
Yeah, completely. And I think that if we think about it from the comparison to other professions, and I'm going to use primarily law and medicine since I'm fairly familiar with them. Law also has these internship
Mhm.
side pieces, and then medicine has the residency programs, which is the exposure to the actual work as well. So being able to look more towards that. And then you mentioned the experiential learning, which also a lot of medicine or medical schools use problem-based learning so that you're actually looking at actual case studies and things that have occurred and actually working through that, which is also something that I've been encouraging on the accounting side. I think we need more problem-based learning on the academic side.
Yeah, which is really hard to do. Like it really is. And I say that from the expectation of you have one semester, right? A professor has one semester on a topic. Generally speaking, that topic is bigger than you can cover in the semester anyways. And so they're cutting down to the like core pieces of it so that at least those concepts get covered, and then you're adding on, okay, so how do we incorporate big case studies? And if you have 3 credit hours, that's a very difficult time frame to add these things in. And so I think that like curriculum should adopt more of that type of experiential learning, but it's very difficult to do in the structure of traditional university learning. And so I do think it is our profession's responsibility to our next level of accountants coming up to give them that through these types of structured internship programs, whether it be through the AICPA or the state or individual companies coming up with it. I think that there is an absolute like huge benefit across the board to everybody to do well in these programs and structure them in meaningful ways, especially with technology accelerating the pace of career trajectory.
100%, 100%. And I'm really glad you brought that up because I see a lot of employers pushing on the schools to say, hey, you have to do all of this stuff. And I keep arguing back and going, have you seen what they have to cover? Do you remember what we cover in that class? Like they cannot. There exactly as you said, there is not enough time. And so what do we that and I always felt the same. It's like this is part of the onboarding or
Mhm.
on the job training, but now with AI coming in and other technologies coming in that are going to change this, we need to adapt the onboarding and for how we actually do this stuff or build it into an internship program.
Yeah. Well, and I think, twofold, right? Like that study looking at like, and there are many studies that look at like the gap between um, students graduating and employer expectations, right? Like, and there's always a gap, whether it be on one or the other, but it is a time gap too. Like there is not enough time and there's not enough like ability to be flexible with university curriculum to fill that gap. So if you decide, okay, these power skills are more important than these technical skills, then you're going to have people graduating not understanding the fundamental technical side, but will be much more adept at functioning inside of a business. So it's like you get one, you don't get both, right? You can balance it a little bit better here and there, but unless you're going to overhaul like how traditional education is presented altogether, which may be coming, like, and I think it is in many different ways, but unless you're willing to completely overhaul the university system and the way they're accredited, like you can't do everything. which I also think is part of why like we had the genesis of the 150-hour rule inside of accounting to try and get more broad-based learning and enforce, master's programs, which do give you more critical thinking skills, which do give you more of those power skills by default because of the level of the material and the ability to elevate and the teachers, well, the professor's ability to like integrate in more of that experiential and case study type learning, because that is the design of a further degree, right? And so when you remove those requirements and you don't have these students going through those master's level curriculum, and then you end up with bigger gaps. And so it's like we have to understand the implications of all of these decisions across the board and just be cognizant of it and talk about it. And I think it does not do any service to the students to not understand this prior to going into an internship so that they actually know what to get out of it, right? Like, I don't know about you, but if you put me into any kind of program and you're just like, here's a program, I'm like, okay. And I do my best with what I think the expectations are. But if I don't have my own goals, if I don't know what I should be getting out of it, I'm not asking the right questions. I'm not focusing in the right places. Like, I'm just doing to do to get through it, because that's what the public school system teaches us to do, is just kind of like move through, right? You don't know what you're supposed to be getting out of it. So anyways, I think it's our responsibility to tell students and to work with the community so that people who show up in those internship programs actually know what they're trying to get out of it so that they can focus their attention and experience it in the right way.
Completely agree. That's why for the one that we're creating, which we're hoping can be a model we can replicate in multiple states, is we're creating a partnership so that the school understands what their responsibilities are. In this case, the nonprofit understands what their responsibilities are. And even though we're calling it a nonprofit partnership, we actually are also working with firms. So the first part of the internship is exposure to financial accounting. The second part is exposure to managerial accounting, both at a nonprofit. The third one is actually internal audit for nonprofits. And then the fourth one is actually tax. And in this particular case, we're working with a church. And so it's because ministers are considered independent contractors, even to their own church. There's tax nuances around that. So we're doing tax prep. We're coordinating with a tax firm to do tax prep and tax planning for them. So we're giving them exposure to each of the major functions or major roles that we might play or specialties we might have within our profession.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, as long as we keep pushing forward that type of work, we'll be able to bridge the gap as a profession, right? Like, we will be able to fill those needs and have, really wonderful students graduate and know, okay, I'm expecting this gap. I'm going to go fill it through an internship. Here's how I'm going to learn what I need to learn to be successful. And, it's our responsibility to give that next generation information and the ability to get the upfront things that they need to be successful in the profession. Because without it, our profession doesn't continue in the same meaningful way.
100%.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up the conversation?
I think my biggest one again is just going to be for those employers that are listening out there, recognize your own role and responsibility in the development of this. Really, it's the pipeline for you, because it's not just your entry level, but it's how do you progress people through. And if you want to have people that are going to progress through, you need to help and work with the others, the schools, the associations, to really be able to drive this whole ecosystem of us working together to enable the future of the profession, to ensure the future of the profession.
I completely agree. So get involved, think about this, work hard to make sure young people are set up for success so our profession has a future.
Well said.
Thanks for the conversation. Yeah, you too.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Bye now.
The Center for Accounting Transformation provides business professionals with a network for utilizing innovations that are ready for adoption
the training and resources necessary to apply those innovations, and an opportunity to engage the talent and community needed to further the pursuit of innovative accounting practices that drive responsible and mindful business performance. Find out more at our website, www.improvetheworld.net. And if you're interested in sharing your own transformation stories, please contact us there.